June 14th, 1944, Kaiser Shipyard No. 2, Richmond, California. 0542 hours. A cold Pacific fog rolls in from the bay, wrapping the enormous slipways in a damp gray curtain. Welding torches hiss somewhere in the haze, sharp white sparks cutting through the gloom like fireflies trapped in steel. The ground trembles with the rhythmic thud of pneumatic hammers. The smell of hot metal and burned flux mixes with the salt air. Lieutenant Commander Arthur "Red" Malloy, clipboard under his arm, steps onto the catwalk overlooking Slip 47. He pulls his watch from his coat. 0543. The Victory ship down below, hull VC-219, is supposed to be weeks from completion. But workers swarm the skeleton like ants on a carcass, and something about the pace makes him stop. He squints. A 30-foot section of hull, a perfect chunk of prefabricated steel, dangles from a crane and settles into place with a thud that shakes the catwalk. It isn't raw plate. It's finished, wiring already laid, bulkheads sealed, piping pre-installed. The entire module locks into the lower hull like a puzzle piece. Malloy frowns. "This can't be right," he mutters. "They can't possibly be this far." Down on the shop floor, engineer Frank Delaney, his goggles pushed up onto his soot-streaked forehead, gives a curt wave to the crane operator. Delaney is young. Too young, Malloy thinks, to be responsible for something this large, but the confidence in the engineer's gestures and the choreography of his team is unmistakable. Delaney looks up toward the catwalk and spots the Navy inspector. "Morning, Commander. You're just in time. Module C-11 is going in." Malloy blinks. C-11? But that's... "Yep," Delaney cuts in with a grin. "Second to last midship section. We'll close her up by Friday." "Friday?" Malloy's voice cracks loud enough that a pair of welders glance up. The fog lifts just enough for sunlight to flash off the rows of modules lined like giant steel dominoes waiting for their turn. Every one of them pre-wired, pre-braced, pre-welded. Shop crews slide entire rooms, galley blocks, engine compartments, radio corridors into the hull instead of building them in place like every yard had been doing since the First World War. The inspector starts down the stairs, boots clanging on metal. "Delaney, the Navy has the build schedule at 83 days. You're telling me you're closing the hull in, what, 31? 30? If we don't stop for lunch." The man laughs, but it's the nervous kind. He steps closer, running his hand along the seam where two modules meet. The weld is smooth, precise, almost too perfect for how fast it was done. "How did you pull this off?" Malloy asks softly. Behind him, another crane groans to life as workers guide a massive bow section toward the slip. Delaney watches it glide overhead, then turns back with the hint of a dare in his eyes. "Commander, you're about to see something the Navy still thinks is impossible." He taps the seam lightly with his knuckles. All because of one so-called crazy welding trick. The bow module hovers above Slip 47, suspended by two cranes whose cables hum under the strain. Workers shout signals, hands slicing through the air as the fog finally pulls back enough to reveal the full scale of what's happening. Lieutenant Commander Malloy steps aside as the massive steel block drifts past him, close enough that he can feel the cold radiating from its plates. Engineer Frank Delaney walks with purpose, quick, clipped steps that suggest a man carrying a secret he's dying to reveal. Malloy follows him across the catwalk and down onto the scaffold platform that runs along the flank of the ship. "Look there," Delaney says, pointing to a row of welders crouched along the midship joint. "See what they're doing?" Malloy leans in, except he doesn't see what he expects. No one is crawling inside the ship to tack inner plates. No one is aligning frames with string lines and wedges. The crew is welding from the outside, tracing tight, deliberate beads across seams that have already been locked together with internal guide clamps. "You're welding complete sections without interior bracing?" Malloy asks. Delaney's grin widens. "Not without bracing, with built-in bracing. Pre-placed, pre-measured, pre-welded in the fabrication bays." Malloy stiffens. "You're telling me you're doing all the structural work before the hull is assembled? That's backwards." "That's the point." Before Malloy can respond, a whistle screams from above. The bow module settles fully, perfectly into place. The clamps slam shut. The seam is so tight Malloy can barely slip a fingernail into it. His stomach drops because he realizes what he's witnessing. This isn't a shipyard cutting days off a schedule. It's a shipyard rewriting shipbuilding. Malloy looks back at Delaney. "Show me," he says quietly, "start to finish." Delaney nods once, then "Follow me to Bay 3. He leads him toward the heart of the yard, the place where the crazy welding trick was born. Bay 3 hits Malloy like a blast furnace. The moment the door rolls open, heat rolls out in waves. Inside, the air thrums with welders' arcs, brilliant blue flashes strobing across the dim interior. Sparks rain from catwalks overhead. Massive steel frames hang in jigs the size of small houses, each one tilted at precise angles. The smell of ozone and scorched flux coats the air like dust. Delaney steps aside as two workers wheel a half-finished bulkhead section across the floor. The thing looks nothing like a traditional ship component. Reinforced ribs already run through it, wiring harnesses snake along channels, pipe brackets jut from pre-fitted mounts. It resembles something pulled from a factory assembly line, not a naval shipyard. Malloy takes it all in, trying and failing to piece it together. Delaney leads him to a long steel table bolted to the floor. "This is where it started," he says, 2 years ago. Just 4 of us and a bunch of scrap plate." He picks up one of the strange jigs Malloy saw earlier. Its surface is scarred with thousands of burn marks. "We had a theory," Delaney continues. "If you control the weld order, the heat flow, and the pull forces just right, you can make steel move where you want it to. The distortion becomes predictable, useful." He places 2 steel plates together, pressing the jig across the seam. Then he nods to a welder standing by. "Go ahead." The torch spits to life with a sharp hiss. Malloy watches as the welder stitches a bead in places that make no sense. A corner here, a midpoint there, then another corner completely illogical. But with each bead, the steel shifts microscopically, pulled by the heat. When the welder finishes, Delaney removes the jig. The seam is dead straight. No warping, no pulling, no misalignment. Malloy runs his finger along it, almost unwilling to believe it. "You're using the distortion as alignment." "Exactly," Delaney says. "We build the modules in controlled bays using these patterns. Then when they go to the slipway, they match up like clockwork." "Like machine parts," Malloy whispers. A foreman jogs into the bay, out of breath. "Frank, VC 219's bow section locked 20 minutes ahead of schedule." Delaney gives Malloy a knowing look. "Shall we?" They step back outside just as the shipyard loudspeaker booms to life. "Attention! Hull VC 219, primary structure complete." Cheers erupt across the slipway. Workers throw their gloves in the air. Cranes lower their hooks. A bell rings somewhere near the waterfront. Malloy looks at the Victory ship rising over the bay, a steel giant assembled not in 83 days, but 30. And in that moment, he understands. The war will be won by many hands, But sometimes, victory comes from one crazy idea welded in a back bay by men who refused to believe something was impossible. He turns to Delaney. "Engineer,